In case you're coming or joining us now, we do have Professor Michael Wainaina and Dr. Ekuru Aukot, who are both presidential candidates. And coming to you, Professor Michael Wainaina, before you even give us what plan you have for this country, the fact that it seems like majority of Kenyans view it, and they say perception is reality, as a two-horse race. How are you going to counter that?
I don't know that it is a two-horse race. You are telling
the
me
perception. The perception.
Who has created that perception? For example, you have had a clip there for people saying that they're interviewing Kenyans. So somebody goes to the streets and interviews 5 Kenyans, and all of them happens to be Raila's supporters. And then he says it is a two-horse race. You know, Michael, these narratives are created. They're not real. So we probably do need to ask the people who are creating these narratives where they got a two-horse race from, and who are these two-horse races, and who are the rest of the participants? Are they donkeys? Are they sheep? Are they, you know, even the imagery that is being used is fairly fairly demeaning to the people of Kenya. Michael, the people of Kenya are going to make a decision on 8th of August.
Correct.
They haven't made that decision. This assumption that some politicians have that they can herd people like sheep. You have heard one of the guys saying that their tribal kingpins have finally come together, and now they're going to be herded like sheep to vote for whoever. I have said consistently that our problem in this country ni siasa ya ukabila, ukora na upuzi. And a two-horse race is a spin-off from siasa ya ukabila, ukora na upuzi. We are 8 candidates. I do not underestimate anyone. In fact, I have a lot of respect for the non-horses, okay, if there are 2 horses, for the non-horses, yes, for the rest of the animals, whatever they are.
Yeah.
Because I do understand the courage that it takes, and the commitment that it takes, and the conviction that it takes for somebody to say, we need to confront and deconstruct this nonsense that is coming from Jubilee and NASA.
Let's go to your plan for Kenya.
Yes. Yesterday was a big day for me, because not because we were approved by the IEBC. We knew we were going to be approved by the IEBC. The process is a little bit tedious. The process is a little bit demanding, but the process is doable. And I would like to congratulate my colleague here, because we are one of the few who just went in on the fast take. It tells you that education counts for something. I'm excited, Michael, because for the first time in the history of presidential elections in this country, youth and women agenda are top in a presidential race. That has never happened. The races that we've had before will mention youth, will mention women, but they will mention them in order to look politically correct. And I'm not saying that is what Ekuru is doing. He has his 5 pillars, and he has told you that youth and women is part of them. And congratulations for him for recognizing that is supposed to happen. But I have said consistently that my candidature is about a partnership between honest men and women in order to inspire and to invest in the next generation of young people who are going to modernize this country. I think that this country can be leapfrogged from a third world country into a first world country in a generation. But for us to do that, we have to invest in a new generation of young men and women who are going to modernize it. That is why I'm running for president, so that in this race, the young people and the women of this country become a main agenda. I have always said that if you're not on the table, you are on the menu. And for the last 54 years, women and youth have been on the menu. It is time that they come to the table. We've had this discussion before. I've told you that women in this country do not know how to speak the language of power. Youth do not know how to speak the language of power. The language of power is not give me. The language of power is, I am here to take what belongs to me, commensurate to my contribution and commensurate to our numbers. And like Ekuru has said, women are the majority. They are 54% of the population or more, depending on who you ask. Youth are 70% of the population. And therefore, as a political constituency, they should not be negotiating. They should sit on the table and demand what it is, what what belongs to them. And that is the reason I'm running, that for once on this political podium, the youth and women are not only represented, they are top on the agenda.
All right, and we'll come to some of how you're going to execute that and how you plan to do that, because obviously politics, like they say, is a game of numbers,
Yes.
and we'll be looking at those numbers. But Dr. Aukot, you also mentioned something to do with corruption, which is something that seems to have been escaping many of the leaders that we have had. And it's not just this regime. If we look at corruption, it's something that came from a while ago. But looking at, NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga has said that he will deal with corruption head-on if elected as president. Speaking in his first political rally in Nairobi after being cleared by IEBC, Raila said NASA will not tolerate corrupt individuals in government. Will he really do that? Here is what he had to say on Sunday afternoon. We do apologize. There seems to be no sound on that particular bite from Raila Amolo Odinga. But coming back to you, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, and you did mention one of the things that you would deal with is what's happening in the public coffers. How would you deal with that, given that those in power currently, we seem to have institutions, we have laws, we have all those things in place, but it seems to be slippery in the hands of our leaders. What would be different about you?
So first of all, Gitonga, theft of public money. By the way, this language corruption sanitizes theft. In our respective mother tongues, I do not think we can find the word corruption.
There is actually no corruption.
There is no corruption. So it's actually theft. So I think for us, the first thing that we are going to do as Third Way Alliance is to simplify the description we are called to theft of public money. We just call it theft. And that if you are the person in charge and cannot account for this money, then you must be charged as a thief.
The question is, okay, we didn't hear what Raila had to say right there, but what makes your promise for fighting theft different from that of Raila Odinga?
First of all, we are here two presidential candidates. We don't have to be told what other presidential candidates are saying out there. It will be important for you to hear what Ekuru Aukot or Wainaina has to say about this issue of theft. Number one, there is no fighting theft of corruption that can come out of Raila or Uhuru. And I want to give Kenyans 15 years. Let's go 15 years backwards. Look at all the major corruption scandals in this country and who has created them. The people who are telling you today that they want to fight corruption are actually the authors of that theft of public money. I'm talking about Goldenberg, Kazi kwa Vijana, Mahindi, Eurobond, SGR. I mean, there are so many, I can't even exhaust them. Makaburi Saga, the land in Lamu, where both Jubilee and NASA were actually in the same government. And I never heard, and I will challenge them, and I'm really looking forward to public debate with these two individuals you describe as two horses. I would want to challenge them to tell me which one of them, seated in that cabinet, objected to the other and told the other, you are the author of this theft, the so-called computer error. So solution number one, Gitonga, is Fagia Water. Fagia Water, both Jubilee and NASA. That is the ultimate solution to fighting this corruption. This country needs freshness. This country needs people with ideas. This country needs people without baggage. Number two, I'm a trained lawyer. I have acquired certain skills about prosecution, about evidence gathering, about investigation. And I think this is a skill that has never been applied in the governance of our affairs. And like Prof. Wainaina was saying earlier, we must be able to appreciate training and people's education. What is it that I can inject in terms of knowledge, in terms of even global eye view into the governance of this country? That we hardly don't look at that. And I would wish Kenyans to say, let's look at the people we are competing with. Let's pull out our competencies and suitabilities to perform anything, whether academic, whether professionally or not. So I think there is need to be able to bring people who do not have baggage of the past, who cannot say, I benefited from corruption, or who can say, I was never on the table where Anglo-Leasing was discussed, Eurobond was discussed, and I did nothing.
Dr. Aukot, allow me to interrupt here because the reason why, you've brought in the aspect of Fagia Water, which is a good idea. But the reason why I was asking you why your statement and that of Raila is different is because if we look at the number of legislators that go back to office, we fagia 80%, but we still remain with the same problem. So what makes your fagia different from that has happened before?
Fighting corruption in Tonga, and there are many examples in the world I can give you, requires political goodwill from the top. And one of those political goodwill is that of the presidency. I will give you an example of next door neighbor, Rwanda. Paul Kagame is fighting corruption. Everybody knows that in Paul Kagame's Rwanda, you cannot even appear to be wanting to solicit for a bribe from a cop or from anybody because the top guy does not condone it. So what you will find in Ekuru Aukot is that you will not hear Ekuru Aukot say, Muntaka nifanye nini? What do you want me to do?
But then again, the same person that you quote is also accused of being a dictator. In other words, he's basically pushing down the throats of people. And they say the beast comes with a smell. So are you saying that for us to get rid of corruption, then what we need is that kind of a leader who does not negotiate?
Let me tell you, I think where we have reached in this country, we need some benevolent dictatorship in this country. People who say this is the strategic direction my country must take. Now, people might say that, oh, that's being high-handed. But it's also about how do we bring to an end some of the bad manners we have had in this country, where leaders are given money and then nobody punishes them. There is no high-handedness from the top. I wouldn't mind being high-handed in the fight against this corruption because I know its effect. When 5 billion Tonga disappears from the Ministry of Health, Afya House, at the time when Kenyans are dying of just simple medication, for lack of simple medication. Isn't that really something that requires a tough figure?
All right, I'll come back to you on high-handedness and what your definition of high-handedness is. Professor Wainaina, your solution to corruption. Or some of the major things that are affecting Kenyans today, because it's not just corruption. Corruption is only one of them. And anyway, let's just call a spade, theft of public coffers.
Michael, the mother of corruption is tribalism. The leaders of NASA and Jubilee are tribal demagogues. That tells you that they have absolutely no capacity to fight corruption. I will give you an example. And when I say that tribalism is the mother of all corruption, okay, let me take you back to 2007. These tribal demagogues in NASA and Jubilee took this country to war. Kenyans died. They say 1,300, that's an official figure. Others lost their property, others got their lives disrupted. Michael, up to today, nobody has ever been held responsible for the pain that the women suffered, for the rape, for the death, for those who are infected by HIV, for the young people who died and disappeared. No one has ever been held responsible. Yet, when you listen to them talk, they do not tell you that they don't know who was responsible. They tell you he was responsible. The other one says, no, he was responsible, because all of them were responsible. Why have they not been brought to book? Why do we not have justice for the victims of the 2007 post-election violence? Because the tribal demagogues are guilty and they will not address that issue. When it comes to bringing corruption to an end, Michael, we cannot deal with that issue with tribal demagogues in power. It will not happen. My father has a saying to describe the situation. And he says, niko mesharia na omirete. Unatafuta mbuzi yako na yule mwenye aliikula. He is the one who is helping you to look for it.
For your lost goat.
For your lost goat. For your stolen goat. Okay? So your goat is stolen, and the guy who ate it is the one who is helped. Will you ever find it? That is the reason, Michael, at the EACC, for 20 years plus, that door has been revolving. Do you see it? Every day. When they talk about EACC, in fact, for me, it has become the image for EACC, the revolving door. Okay?
It never stops revolving.
But it never stops revolving. We are looking for our stolen goat with the people who stole the goat.
or who ate the goat.
Or who ate the goat. We will never find it. The people who ate our goat are in NASA, they are in Jubilee, they are the tribal demagogues there. I have told Kenyans, Michael, they must choose two things. And those two things are mutually exclusive. It's either or. It is not both and. You must either choose change or you must choose tribal demagogues. And if you choose tribal demagogues, shelf change, because it is not going to come from them. They are the ones who stole our goat. They're the ones who ate it. We will never find it with them.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, and I wanted to add this, Gitonga. If you look at the manner in which appointments have been done to the institutions that are actually supposed to fight theft of public money, it's almost choreographed. It's like we are deliberately picking a friendly person into that institution, or a weak person whose dirt we know. I mean, if you look at the history, right from I think Ringera, then came to Lumumba, then Matemu, then Kinisu, now Wabukala. I mean, you can actually see the choreography. So the intention seems to be, let's ensure that these institutions are dysfunctional. Whereas as a president, you have the power, persuasive power, to be able to go beyond and convince people let's enact this law. But you don't seem to have the same power to give responsibility to the person who will help you fight corruption to a credible individual. An individual who will not suck up to you, who will not revere you. And that has been the problem. I think for me, my presidency will not be one that picks individuals in charge of this institution that will fight corruption because they must look up to me, they must worship me. Unfortunately, in our country today, institutions are being killed by the presidency of this country because they want to deliberately plant weak individuals based on tribe, based on balancing. I wouldn't care. I would want to look for merit. I would want to look for a rabid dog in charge of ESCC that can actually go after anybody, including even myself, if I was suspected. That we have not seen in this country. And I think that's why Kenyans must look outside this box of tribe. And we say at Third Way Alliance, ukabila ni ujinga. None of us today, based on tribal mobilization, can actually afford the price of unga. Rent is due today or tomorrow for many people. I've never seen Kikuyus line up in State House and say, because Kamwana, who is from our neighborhood, is a president, sasa utupatie pesa ya rent, sijui utupatie pesa ya unga.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
So we
it's
are saying
not about
to Kenyans, we are pushing for issue-based politics, Gitonga. And with issue-based politics, then you are able to actually address the concerns that affect this country, including the 5 issues that I've told you.
All right, and this is Morning Express. We want to say goodbye to our KTN home viewers for Life and Style to begin in just a bit. Remember, in studio, we have 2 presidential candidates, and we'd like to find out what is their plan for this country as we approach August the 8th, where we go to the ballot and decide who's going to be our next president. So we're going to continue with this debate. Remember, you're welcome to participate. I'm seeing your social media comments coming through, and I'll be reading through them later on as we continue with this debate. But for now, I'd like us to say goodbye to our KTN home viewers for Life and Style to begin. But for those of us on KTN News, we continue with this conversation. And those of us on KTN Home that would like to continue this conversation, switch over to KTN News. So for KTN Home, goodbye. All right, now the National Super Alliance has continued to insist that they have 10 million votes locked even before we get to the election. This is despite security agents calling for sobriety ahead of the polls. This is the latest from Machakos Senator Johnston Muthama and a response from President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Na Kalonzo, Wetam, Davadi na Ruto na Wakenya wale wengine, tunaze waizi waache kuiba mali yenu. Na tukisema tunakura milioni 10, munajua Kaiseri anaanza kujikojolea. Wangapi wanasema ni milioni 10? Jambo la pili,
sisi hatuna haja na wananchi milioni 10. Sisi haja yetu ni wananchi milioni 45. Sisi haja yetu sio jamii hii au ile. Sisi haja yetu ni jamii zote 42 za taifa la Kenya. Sisi hatuna haja na wazee au vijana. We are interested in all our people. We want our women to have a place in society, in our society.
All right, so that's what we have from Mudhama, who is part of NASA, and the president basically throwing at each other jabs of how many votes that they have already secured. Professor Michael Wainaina, politics is a game of numbers, and maybe the reason why they say that is because they've been at this for a while and possibly would like Kenyans to believe that indeed they do have that support. First of all, do you believe that they have that kind of support? And secondly, what are you doing to ensure that you also have that kind of support? Because you need the numbers to make it to president.
Michael, politics is a game of numbers. I agree. No one has more numbers in this country than the youth. No one has more numbers in this country than women. In fact, there isn't a single tribe that has more numbers than young people or than women in this country. The problem is not numbers. The problem is the tribal narrative. That when they're talking about numbers, they're talking about tribal numbers. That shouldn't be surprising. Tribal demagogues don't know anything else. So we can't blame them. We can't say, why are you counting? Because when they sit down, this is what they discuss. This is what they talk about. My question is, who are the greatest victims and casualties of this kind of tribal nonsense that we have had? It is the youth and the next generation in this country. And that is why I have said, if this society is going to change, Michael, we must invest in a new generation of young people who are going to modernize it. Not this nonsense. You have heard them talking about 10 million. They sit down and I mean, it has become so nauseating. They sit down and count Bukusus are this number, Kalenjins are this number, Kikuyus, and then they do their mathematics, and then they come here to shout. Michael, society does not change because the old guard changes its ways, okay? So these tribal demagogues in Jubilee and NASA will not change because they cannot change. Society changes because a new generation with new ideas comes in and, like I have said, takes its place at the table. And that is why I'm running for president, to inspire and invest in a new generation of young people who will modernize this country. This country will not be modernized by NASA. It will not be modernized by Jubilee. In fact, Michael, NASA and Jubilee are not the solution. They are the problem.
All right, Dr. Aukot.
As we say, the only way for this country is third way alliance. And the reason is this. I would like to challenge Kenyans. The mobilization we are seeing today along tribal lines is not new. It's not new. It has never been new. It has always been there. The question Kenyans should be asking themselves is, what benefit has come out of being mobilized around tribal lines? It's nothing. It's misery. It's desperation. When you see the so-called 10 million, and by the way, that's even offensive to our own election laws. Elections are supposed to be, secret ballot. So what guarantee do they have that they have 10 million? But be that as it may, let them claim that, because like Prof said, that's all they know, mobilizing around tribal lines. The question for me really is, and I want to challenge Kenyans, when you are being mobilized along tribal lines into those big rallies, you are rained on. Those fellows will jump into their SUVs. You will probably you'll walk home, probably sleep angry, probably be mugged along the way. What we are saying is that it's important that we look at Kenya beyond tribe. And we have nothing against being a member of a certain tribe. As a matter of fact, as we say at Third Way Alliance, we would like to celebrate our diversity. I do not see Kenya as being Kenya without Luos, without Kikuyus, without Kalenjins, without Turkanas, without Samburus, without the Ogieks, the Malakote. I think that diversity is in itself very rich. And this is what makes us Kenyan. But the question is, when you are elevated to a position of a presidency, you ought to be able to play that father figure. look upon every Kenyan and say, how do I create opportunities for each and every Kenyan wherever they are, so that we can actually begin to build a nation state, one country that we all belong. And this is why you can see in one of our pillars, ending economic and social injustice in this country, because we have not deliberately built opportunities or created opportunities in many parts of this country where people will begin to see, regardless of me being seeing a Kikuyu or a Luo, why will a Luo or a Kikuyu be pitted against each other? The pangs of hunger in Ishaweri village, where Uhuru may have come from, and the pangs of hunger in Bondo, where Raila may have come from, are the same.
All right, gentlemen, let's stick with the numbers. And you've both mentioned constituents that are common to both of you, but away from tribe, and that is women and the youth, which is a constituents, of course, we've not had the other parties talk about. What stops you two, because again, it is still about numbers, coming together and forming a coalition of sorts, whether a party or whatever you want to call it, and then have one of you as president? Because at the end of the day, the more presidential candidates we have, assuming Kenyans are going to be spread out that way, the less chances of having one particular one go, and win because of numbers.
Yeah.
Prof?
Michael, your assumption, your argument is based on the wrong premises. People have come together before. And I have said that the issue about politics is not about coming together. It is about why are you coming together, okay? So this argument of coming together, for me, does not make sense.
And what stops both of you from now joining together and saying, look, we have two constituencies that we are appealing to, the youth and women?
Appeal to the constituencies. Appeal to the constituencies. Michael, my friend Ekuru has one vote. The rest of the votes are with the people. And it is my responsibility and his responsibility, and he has a message, okay? It is his responsibility to take his message to the people. Let me remind you, one of the main clarion calls for the second liberation, the one he referred to, it was let the people decide. It has become so difficult in this country for politicians to accept that the final arbiter on matters politics is the people. And because the tribal kingpins think that they have locked a constituency, they don't think that it is necessary for them to take issues to the people. Me and Ekuru know that we need to take our issues to the people, and the people need to decide on those issues. And therefore, for me, when I talk to the people, I'm telling the people, look at the future, look at where you want to go. I'm telling every young person, you have an appointment with the future. The political class in NASA and Jubilee do not. You need to know who will take you to that appointment. How will you get to that appointment in the future? And therefore, my message does need to go to the people. The people need to decide on that message. Michael, let us not imagine that the people are stupid. The people are not stupid.
It's not imagining that they're stupid, Professor, but the bottom line is you want a better Kenya. He wants a better Kenya. At the end of the day, the only way that's going to happen is when the people, now the masses that you're talking about, come together and decide it is Michael Wainaina or Dr. Aukot. But the truth of the matter is, if both of you are in one place, then it makes it easier for the electorate. But I'll come back to you on that. Let me just take a call from Michael in Mombasa. Michael in Mombasa, thank you for calling to your comment or question.
Yes, good morning, Bitonga.
Yes, morning. And I'll request that you make it as brief as possible. Please get to the point.
Thank you. To the point. And first of all, I would like to appreciate our experts out there, Mr. Aukot and Mr. Wainaina, where I wish them well in their presidential case. But in the meantime, I would like to talk about the age factor. We've had this issue about the age factor for too long, and it's time that the nation... about the age factor for too long, and it's time that the nation dispels that lie. We understand that we have more youth, and of course more women, and of course old men. But the fact is, at the end of the day, I'm saying that we have more youth, of course, and more women. That's what I'm saying. But but the narrative that you need to have a new narrative, for you to have a new political dispensation, that's not true. And of course, these are learned individuals, and they have seen even the political way. We've seen Donald Trump, who's actually an old man. We have seen Buhari. We have seen even the new Ghanaian president. And in all these nations, in particular, let's look at America, for instance. They have over 200 million youth who, if the point was just about having youth, then definitely we should have had a youth. And another thing is, when you talk about women, there was Clinton. The issue is, do you have what it takes to do what we want to take Kenya where it needs to go? And that's exactly our point. Everything that we'll be discussing about the Kenyan population should evolve around that point. And another thing is, in this country, we have the only two political groups. We have the have and those who have. The way, if every time you go out to look for votes, I think that's what you should concentrate on. But we talk about age. If you think that age is equality, that's not the way to go. And then let's talk about the other issue of those who have their clarion call. Others talking about 45 million. We know we don't have 45 million registered voters, and others talking about 10 million. There's nothing unconstitutional about that, and our court out there should definitely testify to that.
All right.
But we don't have.
All right, thank you very much. Michael from Mombasa there giving us a call. And just a quick reminder that you're welcome to also call. And if you have any questions for the presidential candidates that we have in studio this morning, feel free to give us a call and let us know. But
and
coming
we do have, just before you continue, some other questions also coming in on social media, Michael. And this one is for Dr. Ekuru Aukot. And they ask here, does Aukot have a work plan for the development of young people? If elected to power, will he invest more in young people?
All right, and there's also another comment here. I agree with Ekuru Aukot. This country needs a benevolent dictator to rid of the endemic corruption and tribalism. But coming back to the question that I posed to Professor Michael Wainaina, before we also comment on Michael's comments in regards to infrastructure and also a new political narrative. First of all, what stops you from joining hands and getting those numbers?
Gitonga, I think Professor Wainaina is being elusive about that question. I think, let me be brutally honest. I think the problem in this country has been very selfish leadership. People suffer from a lot of ego.
And is it this selfishness we're seeing here?
I think let's admit that there's a level of selfishness in us because, let me just explain myself. I think there is a level of selfishness in us because, first of all, for me, running for president is not an afterthought. It is something that I've thought about for a long time, since 2011. 2013, I figured out that I wasn't ready because we formed G47. And in forming G47, actually, I was very instrumental in trying to bring together about 21 political parties. And I've challenged these 21 small political parties together. Why do you have so many parties in Kenya? Why don't we collapse these parties into one? And I actually wanted to challenge people to come together. I have tried to do this many times. But I realized that people love their own small outfits. People do not want to be selfless and to say we can actually work together. Up until very recently, about 3 weeks ago, you may have seen me trying to convene, or after a conversation. In fact, Professor Wainaina was there, Joe Nyaga was there, Cyrus Jirongo was there, and I was there myself. And we sort of wanted to open up this discussion to ask ourselves, will we be better off if we actually worked together? Or are we spreading ourselves too thin? And the truth for the matter is, yes, we are spreading ourselves too thin. But people are not courageous enough to eyeball each other and say, guys, I am going to drop my ambition, or who amongst us is a better candidate we can prop and with support of everybody. So I think the truth for the matter is, I think one of the problems in this country is the selfish leadership. I'll tell you this. But I've reluctantly, up until February of this year, I was reluctant not to register Third Way Alliance as a political party. It was supposed to be a movement, and we tried to reach to as many people as possible. But I realized it is so difficult to convince people to come together. And that's when we decided at Third Way Alliance, I think let's take our story, and maybe this is where I agree with Professor Wainaina. In the light of all this, then let's just take our story to the people of Kenya and let the people of Kenya see who has a better plan, who has a better ideology for this country. And let ideas compete now. Now that maybe that is water under the bridge, now that all of us are presidential candidates, I think it's best we take our ideas to the people. But we at Third Way Alliance are not opposed to actually coming together to working with like-minded Kenyans. Okay. Because I think there is very little...
Prof, just before you move on to Prof. Michael, more feedback coming in here from social media. And Nyakoko here says, Prof speaks very well about his vision for Kenya, but he's failing to tell us how he will meet this vision. The same to Ekuru Aukot. And then also Frederick says, what are the unique features distinguishing these two from the others? We are really used to the same old narratives.
Ekuru is saying that he is running for this because he is a selfish fellow. And
no, I didn't say that.
When you say that we are selfish,
no,
okay,
I didn't say that.
And that's why I wanted to issue a disclaimer that if he is, I am not. Michael.
I said I've attempted to bring you guys together, including
You haven't.
the last meeting.
You haven't.
You are in a meeting?
Yes.
The records are there.
There
at
was
the Karanda
no,
Hotel, where I actually convened all of them.
You didn't convene all of us. You didn't convene all of us.
Let's get this debate going.
You didn't convene all of us. You didn't convene all of us.
I actually called each one of you.
You didn't convene all of us.
All right.
I have, and we had this discussion before this. Michael, I have never been in a meeting or in a sitting where an agenda was tabled of collapsing our campaigns into one. I have never been invited to such a forum, okay? That's number one. Number two, there is something that we need to appreciate, and there is something that we need to understand. Pluralism in this country was fought for, okay? People went to the trenches to fight for pluralism. And therefore, when Kenyans come out and they bring out their ideas so that they can compete in the political space, there is nothing wrong with that. I was very excited myself when I heard that there were 18 presidential candidates. I wanted them to be 40. I wanted them to be 100. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. The only way, Michael, we are going to change the political discourse in this country is to pivot from political alliances by politicians to ideas that are sold and bought by the people. So I have no qualms about you, Michael, tomorrow coming up and saying, I have new ideas, I would like to present these ideas to the people. Somebody else comes and says, I need to present these new ideas to the people. Because remember, the challenge that we have in this country currently is not a multiplicity of people wanting to lead, is a dearth of ideas. We have no new ideas that are going to the people. And what we need are the Ekuru Aukot of this world, the Nyagas of this world, the people of this world, to make the political space a contestation of ideas. Once we coalesce around ideas, because what now we are being told to do is to coalesce around personalities. That is what the tribal demagogues do, and that
Not
is why.
necessarily.
Prof, allow me to pose you there, because
Yes.
what at the end of the day, that sounds good and it is correct.
Yes.
It is true when we have 1,000 people with 1,000 ideas,
Yes.
that works and it's good for
Yes.
this country. But
Yes.
bottom line is
Yes.
the numbers are what are going to determine who becomes president. And before are you saying then that Professor Michael Wainaina is the one that has the answer for this country and cannot work with Ekuru Aukot?
I am saying that that decision will be made by the people. I have never undermined the capacity of the people to make these decisions. And Michael, that is the problem. Until the political class starts to respect the people, that it is their responsibility to make that decision. That decision is not mine. It is not Ekuru Aukot's. It is the people's decision. And Michael, that is why this is a democracy.
So at what point, Professor, do the people start respecting themselves? Because they put these same people into power.
And until that point when we, the people who want to be in leadership, bring ideas as the driving factor. And remember, it is not that the people do not have these ideas. You know, we assume that people vote stupidly. People don't vote stupidly. Even if people vote for tribalists, okay, it is because the tribal narrative is powerful enough to convince the people to vote for it.
All right, let me hear from Dr.
First of all, I think conviction on whatever you want to do shouldn't be or is not static. It's very naive and mediocre to think that once I have my own conviction, I must always stick to that conviction. I think leadership is also about compromise. Leadership is about finding what is the best in the best interest of society, even if it means actually sacrificing your own personal ambition to achieve the end game, which is to offer this country the best leadership. And there is absolutely nothing. I mean, my position is very clear. If the more of us can work together, the better. And leadership, ideas can coalesce, can be collapsed into one. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with people who believe, 1,000 people who believe in one cause coming together. I think for me that's prudence. I think that's true leadership, and that for me is integrity. So I will not insist. If today somebody else came and told me, I think I'm a better presidential candidate than you, and I'm convinced, for the love of this country, for the sake of this country, I will not be static to my position, because that rigidity, and I think, is what we have seen in this country for the last 54 years, where, for example, our competitors took the longest time to even decide who amongst them is the best. Because, again, I go back, it's an ego thing. If it is not me, hit the highway. I think for me that's pathetic
My way
leadership.
or the highway.
It's bad.
Okay.
And let me come back to the question about the work plan I have for the youth. One of our pillars, and we are changing the language. We're not talking about empowerment of the youth or economically empowering. We are saying youth and women must take over government. And the reason they must take over government is because many of the decisions that are made today affect them. Their daily life struggles are felt today. At Third Way Alliance, we believe that youth of this country must first and foremost reject the notion, the archaic notion, that they are tomorrow's leaders. We must make tomorrow today. And therefore, our game plan is that the youth of this country must take over government, be on the table of decision making, and make decisions that affect them daily. Because if you think about the suffering of the young people in our universities, in colleges, lack of job opportunities, it only calls for a responsive government. Now, you can only address those issues if you become a player. What we are asking for young people in this country, be the players. Stop decorating political rallies. Stop being political flower girls. Be the champions. Be the champions of your own causes. And nobody will give you this.
Okay. We are almost getting to the end of this session because of time. Professor, it's official now. The campaigns have been flagged off by now. Presidents being declared. These are the candidates. Your plan in terms of campaign from here forward. I mean, we've seen the amounts of money that have been flashed around by some of the political aspirants and candidates that we have with choppers. I think we have more choppers right now in Nairobi than we've ever had, God knows for how long. But your plan in terms of campaign, because at the end of the day, you see, with politics, I look at it as a three-legged stool, and it has got campaign, which is engagement. Yeah. Then you have execution. And thirdly, you have engagement, where you're having people coming in. So in terms of now campaign, how are you going to go ahead with that? What's your plan?
You should have asked me the question about what my plan is for the youth, the one that you have asked, because
which you'll also answer.
Yes, because remember, the youth and women are the pillar of what it is that I'm doing. I don't know anything else apart from that. So I'll answer that question, but let me start with your first question about money and about campaigns. And I will go back to the same point that I have been making in this program, that politics is about the people. Politics is not about money. And the biggest resource in politics is the people. The guys who are splashing around money is because they have lost the people and they are trying to buy them back. They do understand that the people are the biggest resource. But because they don't have the people, they have money, they are using money to buy the people. And that's why I said, for me, I will take my case to the people. What is my case? That it is time for men and women of goodwill to partner in order to inspire and invest in a new generation of young people. What are some of the things that I want to do with young people? Number one, and we want to build a youth development and support infrastructure nationally. Do you know, Michael, that in this country, young people are on their own? There is no support for mentoring, there is no support for guidance counseling, there is no information, there is no networking, there is no collaboration, there is no connectivity. You're on your own. And for us to make sure that we invest in these people and we inspire them differently, we have to build a youth development and support infrastructure countrywide. That is number one. Number two, you cannot have participation of people in democracy without representation. Michael, do you know that the youth and women in this country are categorized with the disabled in the Constitution? When you read the Constitution, it talks about youth, women, and the disabled. In the minds of the framers of the Constitution, one of whom is seated here, the youth belong to a category called disabled.
That's not true.
Right.
Okay.
Which chapter of the Constitution and article?
Okay, we will quote the chapter and article of the Constitution.
I can clarify for you.
So
let's not miss
that it's not true. That the youth, women, and people with disabilities are not in the same category.
So let me educate you a little bit, Prof.
Educate me.
On the Bill of Rights. Yes. Our Constitution has categorized all the three categories of rights. Civil and political rights.
Yes.
The economic ECOSOC rights.
Yes.
And the group rights.
Yes.
So it's in the group rights that you actually come to recognize most of these groupings.
Yes.
There is a provision specifically dedicated to youth and women,
yes,
persons with disability,
yes,
and minority. So they
yes,
have not been grouped together. They are actually specific articles of the Constitution that talk about.
All right, gentlemen, we'll need to have closing comments because of time.
Right. Even as they give closing comments, you're talking about the youth, and you have
yes,
youth here. One of them is asking, ask
yes,
Ekuru and Prof, in
yes,
terms of the economy, how are you
yes,
going to transform their lives? Who
yes,
are they?
yes.
Are they capitalist or are they socialist? Very briefly.
That's a big discussion about
I can go fast on that.
Yes.
To be honest with you, these words, capitalism, socialism, are just cliche words.
Yes.
The solution to that is found in our first pillar, which is ending economic and social injustice. And if when you read our economic pillar in detail, we're actually talking about industrializing economic opportunities that obtain in every part of the country. That means job opportunities for young people. And we have actually outlined agro-processing, for example, meat production, fish industry, coconut and cashew nut production. And that means right from the farmer out there who actually harvests or participate in that activity, that's money to processing, to market, to transport. That's all job opportunity, a line of job opportunity. In fact, we estimate in each of those industrial opportunities, we will actually be generating at the very least about 1.5 to 2 million jobs. And I think a bulk of that will definitely go to our youth.
Prof.
Ask any employer today what the big challenge is with our youth and in terms of employment. And any employer will tell you that the biggest problem that we have today with our youth is skills. That the young people who are coming from our colleges and from our universities do not have the skills that they need to be productive in the workplace. And we have ended up with a situation where our young people fall into three categories. The first category is the uneducated, the second category is the undereducated, and the third category is the miseducated. And therefore, we cannot deal with the issue of youth employment without first of all dealing with the issue of skills development, because there is a huge, huge gap, and any employer will tell you.
Can I slightly differ with that?
That there is a huge gap in terms of skills development. And that is why we are saying, or I am saying in my campaign, that the most important thing towards modernizing this country is to invest in young people. One of the ways in which we need to invest in young people is skills development, it is skills transfer, it is technology transfer, it is on-job training skills so that these young people can be employable. We have also said that you cannot provide, you know, there is youth fund, there are other funds that have been provided to young people. The purpose of these funds was never to empower young people in the first place. The purpose of these funds was so that it was to make it easier for the people who want to loot these funds to loot these funds. And therefore, we need to consolidate these funds into a financial trust that will support SMEs and will support cottage industries to expand them in order for young people to be employed. Michael, you do know that 90% of startups fail within the next 5 years. So that when you give young people 10 billion shillings to start businesses, And you know that the statistics are 90% of those businesses will fail
9
in
billion.
5 years. So 9 billion is being wasted. And that model is not working for young people, and it needs to be
All
revised.
right, I need your closing comments,
Okay.
Dr. Aukot, very briefly.
Yeah, just very briefly. I don't think in Kenya that we are working a shortage of skills. I've been a chair of a university council, and actually 2 of them, and I've seen graduate every year. I think the question really is, do we give people opportunities out there to be able to develop skills? That for me is the fundamental question, which is why we are addressing the question of unemployment, which is still today at its highest, 40%. Now, you asked about how do I go out there? We have an elaborate campaign schedule, which is a requirement by the Elections Act, and we already presented that schedule to the IEBC. We have about 85 aspirants out there under Third Way Alliance Kenya. So we are just finalizing on our last plans, and we'll start following our aspirants and take this message to all over the country.
All right, closing comments, Professor.
Closing comments is that the biggest resource that we have for modernizing this country is our young people. We need to change our paradigm from imagining that young people are a problem to be solved to understanding that young people are the biggest resource we have to modernizing this country. And the reason that I'm running for president is to inspire and invest in a new generation of young people who will modernize this country.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We wish you all the best in your campaigns, and who knows, you could be the next president of this republic. Dr. Ekuru Aukot from Third Way Alliance. We also have Professor Michael Wainaina, who is an independent candidate. And before we wind up, I believe, Michelle Ngele, we have quite a lot of social media interaction. Take it away.
All right, Michael, quite a bit of interaction today. A lot of people trying to find out what these 2 presidential candidates stand for. So just to get some of your thoughts here, Amboseli Masai here says, I cannot stop laughing. The fake Michael Wainaina has called the youth disabled. And we have Jim Mwambi here saying, great show, great minds. Frederick says, please ask them if they're indeed honest about the agenda. The youth are tired of being taken for a ride. But we have David Odu here saying, politics is a game of both ideology and numbers. So probably, in terms of numbers, how are they going to bag these numbers, especially for the independent candidates? And Dennis Oscar here saying, Professor should express some manners and stop being arrogant by calling other leaders funny names. Respect is paramount. And lastly, as we wind up here, Nyakoko Mister says, it's the kind of selfishness that you see between Professor and Dr. Ekuru Aukot that harms Kenya. They have the same vision, but they cannot agree to work together. And finally here, Peter says, Michael Wainaina is living in denial because Kenya and African politics are about numbers and a strong coalition. And of course, so many more comments are coming in. Do keep this conversation going in terms of vision. Simon here says, a great debate today against tribalism. Hammer this thing out of media from now on. Do continue with that conversation here on social media. And of course, earlier on, we had asked you whether you know your presidential candidate, and Shadrach Miti was out on the streets of Nairobi trying to find that out. And Shadrach now joins us once again just as we wind up this conversation. Shadrach, what more do Kenyans have to say? Shadrach, if you can hear me, talk to us about the Kenyans out on the streets. I don't know if they've been watching Morning Express to see the other 2 of the 8 presidential candidates that we have, and whether they will be voting for any other than those presumed to be leading the 2-horse race.